Okay, so today we're going deep on something uh, pretty essential for navigating life, especially when things out there feel like a bit much. It's all about this idea of inner detachment. And we're going to be using a really unique source for this deep dive. It's actually an audio recording of Ron W Rathbun's feedback that was given to someone practicing Kelee meditation.
Interesting.
And this feedback, it gives us this really potent way to think about staying steady inside no matter what craziness is happening out there in the world.
That's something I think a lot of people are really looking for right now, with everything that's going on globally.
Absolutely. And, for you, the listener, you're always trying to understand things at a deeper level. That's exactly what we aim to do here.
Exactly.
So this deep dive is really about equipping you with a fresh perspective, how to find that inner balance and how to create meaning in your life, even when everything around you feels chaotic or just overwhelming. We're going to unpack this whole concept of detachment, but it's important to be clear right from the start. The feedback we're looking at actually frames it as a really active and powerful path to inner strength and to finding real clarity.
I'm seeing that in the notes. I have too.
So let's dive into that, the power of detachment. What's at the core of this idea?
Well, the way this concept of detachment is presented is it's really about finding that space, between what happens out there and how you react on the inside.
Okay.
And the feedback is pretty direct about it. It actually says the more you're not affected by others, the easier life becomes.
Wow. So it's like building up that internal resilience so that the negativity from the outside world doesn't have to become inner turmoil.
Precisely.
It makes me think about how easily we can get caught up in, all the anxiety and drama of the news cycle. And the feedback really highlights that when the world outside gets tough, it grabs our attention and pulls us away from that important inner work.
Yeah.
Like checking in with ourselves, reflecting, and actually growing.
Yeah. It's like all our energy gets directed outwards and we forget about what's happening inside.
Exactly. So this feedback is saying the goal isn't to just ignore the world or pretend it doesn't exist, but it's more about learning to look and understand from inside you what is happening outside you.
Right.
It's about processing things through your own internal understanding instead of letting external events completely control you.
It sounds simple, but I think that shift in perspective can be really challenging for a lot of people.
I agree. So how do we actually start to cultivate this inner perspective?
Right.
The recording mentions this idea of accessing the inner mind. It even uses the term Kelee. What does that actually mean for someone trying to develop this?
The Kelee is pretty powerful. It's the stabilizing core of your mind. And the feedback proposes that once you tap into that inner space, you can actually find this internal free space and time detaching from all the pressures of the outside world.
Okay, so it's like having a calm center within yourself, kind of a mental sanctuary that's not constantly disrupted by all the chaos going on around us.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe a simple way to start experiencing that is by, just taking a few moments each day to really focus on your Kelee meditation and just notice how it creates that space within you.
I like that. And so it's about having that internal space where you actually have some agency where you're not just reacting to whatever demands are being thrown at you. Now, the feedback also talks about this idea of inner communication and connecting with what's inside your mind. And it specifically mentions spiritual development and personal well-being.
Right.
Can you expand on what these might look like in practice?
Sure. What's really interesting is that the feedback contrasts getting totally absorbed by that secondary world outside, meaning, all the external events and distractions,
Right.
with consciously directing your inner dialogue and your attention towards things that genuinely nourish, your spirit and help you grow personally rather than getting lost in all those external anxieties and things that don't really matter in the long run.
So it's about prioritizing those things that nurture your inner world.
Exactly. And, the feedback actually says that this is the spiritual path for us to learn to find harmony inside ourselves, independent of what's going on in the world.
That's a really powerful statement.
It is. And so these could be, practicing Kelee meditation, reflecting on your values, doing things that bring you joy and a sense of purpose, or taking time for stillness and silence.
That really brings home the point that while outward peace and stability are great, that inner peace is the real foundation. It's what we need to cultivate first and foremost.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Now, the feedback also talks about this idea of finding meaning during what it calls non-meaningful times.
Right.
And, this feels especially relevant to what's going on in the world today.
For sure.
So how can we actually cultivate that inner sense of meaning when it feels like the external world has kind of lost its way?
The key insight here is that when the world feels chaotic or lacks meaning, we have to consciously create that sense of meaning from within ourselves.
Okay.
It comes from those small daily actions that align with our values and give us a sense of purpose, regardless of what's happening on a larger scale.
So it's about focusing on what we can control.
Exactly. And the feedback points out that many people are in a panicked state right now, and that panic becomes a huge obstacle, a distraction from that inner work of finding our own meaning.
That makes sense. So it's about shifting our focus to those smaller, more personal acts of purpose and growth,
Yeah.
even when things feel unsettled on a global level. Now, the feedback makes this really interesting point about personal growth being the ultimate form of being non-selfish,
Yes.
which at first sounds a little counterintuitive. Can you break that down for us?
Sure. The idea is that by actively working on improving ourselves, becoming more patient, more understanding, more resilient, we actually become a more positive presence in the world.
Okay.
And that internal transformation naturally flows outward into our interactions with others. So as the feedback says, you essentially become a better person for everyone you meet in your life.
Wow. So the benefits of that inner work ripple outwards.
Exactly. It's like a far-reaching way of contributing to the world around us.
And that leads right into the idea of cultivating this non-reactive state within ourselves. The feedback even suggests that this can have a calming influence on the reactive people around us.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful to think about.
It really is. It speaks to that subtle but profound energetic impact we can have on our environment just by maintaining our own inner peace. We create a more stable and less agitated space around us.
It's like being that still point amidst all the chaos.
Love that analogy. Okay, so let's look at the contrasts the feedback draws between our intellect and our inner knowing when we're dealing with difficult situations. It mentions that our intellect might try to downplay the severity of a situation. You may be telling ourselves, oh, it's not that bad. What are the potential downsides of that kind of intellectual dismissal?
Well, the danger there is that we might fall into a sort of self-deception. We get used to a state of being that's not actually ideal.
I see.
By rationalizing or minimizing our difficulties, we prevent ourselves from fully acknowledging their impact, and that can hinder real growth and resolution.
So we're not really addressing the issue at its core.
Exactly. And the feedback refers to this as broken thinking. It's like a mental loop that keeps us stuck.
And the way to break free from that trap is to get in the mind, to move beyond that surface level thinking. So how does this idea of detachment we've been talking about actually help us make that shift?
Detachment gives us that space to observe the situation more objectively, without getting swept away by our emotions right away. That allows our mind to see potential ways forward, even if that way forward is just to consciously disengage internally and refocus on something more meaningful to us.
So sometimes the best response is to detach and nurture our own inner world.
Exactly. As the feedback puts it, sometimes the most powerful action is to simply detach and continue with your day.
That really resonates with the example they give about passively consuming news.
Yes.
While it's good to have some awareness of what's going on in the world, getting fixated on things we can't control can really drain our energy and steal our inner peace.
Absolutely. It's about consciously choosing to focus on areas where we have agency, where we can take action and create positive change.
So it's about choosing what nourishes us rather than getting bogged down by all the negativity out there.
Exactly.
Now, the feedback concludes by talking about this concept of the mind, stating that its true domain is the feeling of us, not the feeling of the world. That's such a profound way to put it. What's the key takeaway there?
The main idea is that our primary experience of reality is internal, while external events definitely affect us and we process them internally. Our fundamental being is rooted in our own sense of self.
I see.
And the core practice, according to this feedback, is to nurture that inner state to get into mind and feel good about yourself.
Right.
And this inward focus isn't about being selfish. It's actually the foundation for navigating all the challenges that the outside world throws at us.
So it's like if our inner home is strong, we're much better equipped to handle anything that comes our way.
Precisely.
So to recap our deep dive into this really insightful feedback on inner detachment, we've explored it not as apathy, but as a vital skill for protecting ourselves from external negativity by consciously shifting our focus inward. We've talked about how to access that deeper, more stable level of mind, how to find meaning even in difficult times, and how to recognize the limitations of just intellectualizing our problem. Ultimately, it's about understanding that our mind's true center lies within our own internal experience.
Exactly. And for you, the listener, this offers a practical framework for dealing with that constant flow of information and all the pressures of the world. It suggests that true understanding and lasting resilience come not from reacting to every external event, but from cultivating a strong and stable inner core.
Hmm.
By prioritizing your connection to your own inner world, you gain a more grounded, empowered, and clear perspective on everything else.
Beautifully said. And to leave you with a final thought, in a world that's constantly demanding our attention outwards, what incredible potential might we unlock by intentionally and maybe even fiercely cultivating and protecting that precious inner space?
It's something worth reflecting on, for sure.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.